So hello, my name is Emma Skye, and I'm director of the Yale World Fellows Program and co-host of Good Society Forum. Now, the Good Society Forum is a community of change makers around the world with a common quest to build the good society. My co-host is Nizam Uddin of the Prince's Trust and is also a 2019 Yale World Fellow. Niz.
Hi, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. And as Emma has said, in our quest to build a community of change makers, which we hope everyone is. So many of the issues that we deal with, and I speak first and foremost as a practitioner specializing in social integration and youth mobilization, are often very interconnected. And I don't know about many of you, but for me, a lot of the work that I do sometimes can feel quite limited to my field. So this forum is designed to inspire each and every one of us to learn about inspiring ideas through exceptional people from our own fields and beyond, and help us to build that good society. We've set up an email address, a Facebook group, and a LinkedIn page, which you can see in the chat function below for the Good Society Forum. We've also, since our inaugural webinar on Sunday, made a few additions to the team, including Tiffany Chan and Juan Carlos Salamanca, who are very welcome. We're very excited to have them, who are going to be supporting us as we grow the Good Society Forum. So today we're going to hear from 3 speakers, and then we're going to take your questions. We're very keen that you all participate. And in that spirit, what we want to know is, of the 60 people that we have with us today, where are you all from? So we would love for you all to just go on the chat function and just type in the city that you're in right now. We can see, so don't feel shy. Brilliant. We have Istanbul, London, New Haven, Rome, Toronto, wow, Cape Town, Bristol, Boston, Amsterdam, Krakow, Karachi, oh my goodness, this is incredible. I think everyone is from a different city. We've got ambassadors representing about near Guildford. I love that. Thank you.
That's the lambs.
Fantastic. Bogota, we have Abidjan, we have Angola, DC, Mumbai, Canada. Goodness, this is fantastic. You're all very.
You forgot Haddenham.
Yeah, I don't know what that is exactly. That's probably why. But we're all grateful for you all being here. So Emma, what's our theme today?
Well, on Sunday, our speakers spoke of the importance of credible voices to counter misinformation about COVID-19. So we're going to pick up on that to look at communication strategies in different contexts. Governments are telling citizens to stay at home, socially distance, and wash their hands to stop the spread of COVID-19. But what happens when people need to go to work to survive? When they can't maintain physical distance, when there's no water, and when people fear the government is trying to punish them? So our first guest today is Doris Alia, who's the Minister of Information and Broadcasting Services and the Chief Government Spokesperson in Zambia. So Dora successfully ran for Parliament in 2006. And since then, she has served as Minister of Energy and Water Development, Minister of Education, Minister of Agriculture, and Minister of Transport and Communication. She previously served as a diplomat and worked in the media. And Dora also participated in Yale's Senior African Women's Program, which I also direct. And we've got a number of women from that African network who have logged on to watch this. So I want to say hello to, who have we got? We've got Samia in Tunisia, so I want to say hello to her. And Dora is an incredible leader. She is brave, she's ambitious, she's a great role model. And her motto is, it's not your fall that will determine your character, but whether you dare to get up after the fall. So before she speaks, we're going to play a 2-minute video which shows the minister in action in Zambia.
Information and Broadcasting Minister Doris Alia has taken it upon herself to disseminate the right messages on the COVID-19. Yesterday, I was in Lusaka's Mandevu constituency together with officers from Zanis. This is because government has taken cognizance that information dissemination is a key component in the fight against COVID-19. This is because information allows people to be aware of the disease and also take preventive measures. Ms. Siliya later told the media that there is need to equip the public with information on the coronavirus pandemic.
People have to internalize the message. They have to appreciate this message in their own locality, in their own language, and understand the full dangers of the coronavirus. And I'm extremely pleased with what Zanis has been doing. Even when I'm not with them, this is what they continue to do, to make sure that they take the message to the people in their own locality, in their own language, so that they understand the dangers of this disease.
Some parts of Lusaka have been cited as hotspots of the COVID-19, and efforts are being made by government to ensure that the disease does not flare up.
And Emma, just before the minister begins, just to remind everybody, if you do have questions during the presentation, please do put them into the chat function. We're going to have a Q&A after all of our speakers have spoken, and we'll have a great conversation with everybody. Over to you, Emma.
Minister, over to you.
Thank you so much, Emma, and hello, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to share what we're doing in Zambia as far as the coronavirus is concerned. Obviously, we all heard about the beginning in December in China. In Zambia, we began preparing very early, late February and March, before we recorded even the first case, because we understood that this disease, this virus was moving so quickly. We say here, the virus doesn't move, people move the virus, and we were expecting it. And so on the 18th of March, we recorded the first case, and we intensified surveillance in the country, especially through entry points, that is the borders and the airports. We made sure that we began quickly to disseminate information nationwide using all platforms, whether it's television, it's SMS messages with a cooperation of our mobile companies, on various social media platforms, adverts, various programming on all the platforms in the country. We needed to equip our people with information. Stopping to shake hands was quite a challenge for our people, because it's very cultural that whenever people meet, they shake hands. But I'm happy to inform everyone that I think everybody has basically understood that they can't do that. Government went ahead to prescribe that every public building needed to have a place for people to wash their hands with soap and water or sanitize their hands. And almost every building, whether it's government, it's private, it's in the shopping mall, every shop, you're not allowed to enter in a shopping mall unless you wash your hands or sanitize your hands at the door. We needed to ensure that our citizens understood that at the end of the day, the frontline person in the fight against the coronavirus is you, it's me. And that has been the message from government, that yes, we are supporting our health workers, but at the end of the day, it is up to you to be the soldier in the front line to fight this disease. We've also ensured that we're as transparent as possible with the citizens. We give them information. I do a daily press brief with the Minister of Health every single day at 11:30 since the 18th of March, whether it's Sunday, it's Saturday, it doesn't matter. Every single day, we give the status of the disease within Zambia, in the region, and world over, so that the people understand that this is a pandemic, it's a world problem, but we also have to address it on a national level. For example, today, we reported to the nation that we have 97 cumulative cases since the 18th of March. We've had 54 recoveries who've been discharged. We've had 3 deaths, unfortunately, 2 males and 1 woman, and we have active cases in the hospitals, 40 as of now, and 15 of these actually health workers, and government has been doing everything possible to ensure that we look after our health workers, that they have the protective gear that they need, and we've intensified testing in the capital Lusaka, which is the epicenter of this disease. We've been going to high density areas, the Ministry of Health supporting partners to ensure that we increase testing so that we can determine the prevalence of the disease in Lusaka. One of the challenges in terms of the communication strategy has been fighting myths that are culturally based, as well as myths being promoted on social media. Most people said, oh, this disease is not for us here in Africa, it's for those people out there in Europe and in America. It is an issue we had to address. And then another myth was, this is just for those people who live in nice areas, it's not for the poor people. It was another myth that we've had to address, that, oh, you just have to get some whiskey and it's fine, or you go and see a local doctor and it's fine. And this is why my team decided that it was not enough to use the technology platforms. We had to go into the urban areas, into the villages, and start talking to the people face to face, using megaphones to ensure that they understand and identify community leaders in those areas. The church has been phenomenal. The traditional leaders, the chiefs, they've been phenomenal. The NGOs in the various communities have been phenomenal in making sure that we bust these myths that coronavirus is not about us, it's only for those people. And I think that the message is getting there. It's only 2 weeks ago when the president pronounced that everybody must be wearing a mask, especially in urban areas whenever they leave their home. And I can tell you, everybody is doing that. The transit, public transport operators have responded by making sure that they don't encourage people to get on the bus or on the taxi without wearing a mask. We've made sure that markets are cleaned every weekend. We shut down the markets so that they're sanitized, so that they're cleaned. Because even though we are on a partial lockdown, we considered in government whether we could do a total lockdown. It was very difficult because most of our people, we know that they live on their daily incomes. They'll make something like $10, $15 per day, and 2-3 members of the family will put that together, and that is the daily income. So it was very difficult to imagine that we could have a total lockdown because we've seen in other jurisdictions that they've actually had civil unrest because of that. So we've had a partial lockdown, non-essential workers at home, both public and private workers, but we're allowing essential services to continue, such as public transport and especially shops, supermarkets and markets and drugstores and so on. And I think that people have been responding to the stay at home campaign. But all the same, we found that social distancing, especially in urban areas, has been, in high density areas, has been a challenge. And that's why we think the mask has been a great help because where they really can't have social distancing, though we are running a major campaign on social distancing, we've seen that people have responded positively. Churches, the church leadership came forward, even when government said, as long as you were at least 50 people, you could meet and social distance for an hour. The church leadership, the Muslim leadership came forward and said they'd rather close because they do not want to risk their membership. So government is very happy with that. And we think that advocacy in terms of continuing to work with our partners to raise financing, to issues in terms of business, social issues, because coronavirus is not just a health problem. It is a socio-economic problem. And we in government are even more concerned about the post-corona period because if many businesses are closed, there are a lot of people at the end of this month to whom Labor Day is just a nightmare because they'll not be able to meet their rent. We are happy that some businesses have come forward to give relief to their workers. Government has given out some stimulus package just last week announced by the president. But all this is ongoing. This is the new normal. We have to learn how to live with this disease. We don't know if it will be for the next 1 month or the next 1 year. The important thing government is doing is to prepare the people that let's live with this new normal and ensure that we'll have sufficient food in the country and people continue to have as normal a life as possible, because we do know that there are many families that are struggling.
Minister, thank you very much for that. We've got 70 participants now who have joined the webinar, and I just want to give a shout out to Marvin Rees, who's the Mayor of Bristol, to Gernot, who is in Rome, to Ali Cindy, who's in Kurdistan. We've also got Melvis, who's from Cameroon. So a great number of people listening in to this. Our second guest is Rema Rajeshwari. Now, Rema, I have to say, is my favorite policewoman in all the world. She's a 2017 Yale World Fellow. And Rema started her career in the police service as an assault commander with the Greyhounds, which is an elite special force, undertaking high-risk operations in the jungle against left-wing extremists. And she's run operations against extremists and human traffickers. She has been active countering the spread of fake news on WhatsApp. She's incredibly busy dealing with COVID, enforcing lockdown and quarantine, and getting funerals done in 45 minutes, feeding migrant laborers, beggars, and homeless people. Rema, thank you so much for joining us.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Emma, for having me in the Zoom meet. It's really good to see all of you. It is really surprising to learn that much of what we are doing in India is so similar to what is being done in Zambia. Minister Siliya was explaining about how they are depending so much on the communication strategies, roping in leadership, encouraging community participation so that the fight against COVID is effective and we should be able to come out of it as early as possible. Today is day 36 of the lockdown in India. The first time COVID came into the public discourse in India was on March 2nd, and back then we had only 5 cases. And today as we speak, we have almost 31,787 cases, and of them almost 7,000 were cured, they were treated, and they are discharged from the hospitals. So given the size of the population that India has, if you look at the numbers that we have right now, it's pretty less. So the strategy that we chose, which was complete lockdown, is really working well on ground. To be precise, on March 22nd, the country decided to go for lockdown, but on that day, the Prime Minister of the country addressed the nation, and he came up with a concept called Janata curfew. Janata means people, and curfew is curfew, people's curfew. Something that the people would do it on their own, nothing that is enforced by the state. By that, he meant that people need to come forward, and this has to be a people, this has to be something which will be completely by the people, for the people. And that worked on March 22nd when we tried to do this Janata curfew. This was an experiment. We wanted to know whether it's going to work in such a huge country with such a huge population. And it did work pretty amazing. So we decided to extend the lockdown, and then we went for another lockdown, and today is the 36th day. And we're also looking at the final 4 days of the lockdown. Officially, the lockdown in India is coming to be over on May 3rd. And given the number of infections in the country,
I think there may be some internet issues just there, so apologies for that. Are you still with us? There we go, Emma, you're now unmuted. We can hear you.
I think we have lost Rema. Let's see if we can get her back.
And I think what we should do is, in the meanwhile, maybe go to our next speaker and maybe bring Rema back in. I think that should work. Oh, Rema, are you back?
Hi.
Brilliant.
Yeah, all right.
We lost
you momentarily. Please continue.
Sorry about that. So I work as the district police chief of Mahbubnagar district in a state called Telangana in southern India. So right now we as police officers we are handling panic management, because in the initial days of the lockdown, it was a huge challenge to convince people to stay home, and to convince them that nothing is going to go wrong, and to convince them that all the essential services will be made available at their doorstep, and to convince people, particularly the migrant laborers, that they are not going to lose their livelihoods and the state is going to take great care of them. This was a huge challenge in the beginning, but the kind of communication strategies that we employed really worked. In the first phase, we had to reach out to the people. Even though we did take help of the social platforms, the digital platforms, we were sending out too many communications, we were trying to convince the people, we were informing people about the government decisions and the steps being taken on a real-time basis, because we didn't want people to panic, and we as police officers, panic means trouble. You may be looking at a huge law and order situation. So everything had to be preemptive, everything had to be preventive. So the first phase was completely being run on preventive policing strategies. And in the second phase, by the time the country entered the phase 2 of the disease transmission, people almost got used to the idea of lockdown. So we didn't have a lot of trouble in convincing them to stay home. But then the economy had to be managed, because we couldn't afford to let the lockdown affect the economy. And we were also facing a little bit trouble in terms of taking care of the migrant laborers, because in India, there is an estimated 100 million informal workers who are the backbone of the economy. So the police officers also had to step in. So in my district, what I did was I established food banks on the national highways, so that truck drivers who are transporting essential goods, who are transporting medical equipments, and the ambulance drivers who are transporting medical emergency patients, they are being fed. And the laborers, the daily wage laborers who come out of their homes and who go to their workplace, the workplaces where the essential services were being run. And since all the restaurants and the food joints were closed, and these people couldn't find anything to eat, so the police officers came up with an idea that we have to establish food banks in some of the important locations where these laborers, the migrant laborers and homeless people and the poor and the really needy ones could just come and grab a meal. So that really worked, and that really worked in terms of controlling the panic, because the amount of anxiety and fear that we saw in the first 10 days was really terrifying, because this was a new challenge for us also, because we were not expecting it, even though we were watching what was happening in the rest of the country, like China and Italy, Spain and some other countries, but we never imagined that this is going to come and strike us. So that was really taken care of, and the moment we ensured that these homeless people and the migrant laborers were taken care of, a major part of the lockdown challenge was over. And then we were looking at contact tracing, because the first case was reported in my district on March 24th, and we immediately got down to aggressive contact tracing. And today, when as I'm talking to you, we must have traced almost 2,000 people on a mere 11 COVID positive patients, and that takes a gigantic exercise, because you have to trace the people and you have to track them down, and then you have to convince them to come forward to take the test, and then you have to assist the medical teams to collect the samples, and then there is only one designated hospital which does the testing. So you have to make sure that all the collected samples are sent to the hospital. And there were also some incidents where the healthcare workers were attacked. So we also had to ensure the security of the healthcare workers, and we had to ensure the security of the hospitals where these patients were being treated. And there were also incidents where once a COVID positive patient is discharged from the hospital, he goes back home, enters the community, and he had to face some sort of a stigma because of the fear, the amount of anxiety which was already there. So we had to ensure that this person doesn't go through secondary victimization. So we had to convince the community, keep on talking to them, to tell them that, no, this is nothing to be worried. The state is doing enough to take care of you and the welfare of the people, the health of the family members. So that amount, the amount of work that went into managing COVID in the first 3 weeks was really huge. And today,
Oh, I think we're losing Rema again. It might be the internet, but I think maybe, Emma, we should move on to our next guest and let Rema come in when we do the Q&A for anything that she may not have been able to mention. So I think we've just lost Rema, but she'll be back very shortly. That was fascinating from Rema, hearing the Indian context, and especially actually some of the similarities to what we've heard from Zambia. So up next, we have a very special speaker who I'm going to encourage to show his face, so you can all see who he is as I introduce him. We have Leonid Volkov. Leonid is founder of the Internet Protection Society, an NGO focused on internet freedom and digital rights in Russia. He's a 2018 Yale World Fellow. He is a Russian politician and was campaign manager and chief of staff for Alexei Navalny, leader of the Russian opposition. Leonid is extremely brave. He has been in jail a number of times for political activities. He's the author of The Cloud Democracy, a book on how modern technology could reshape and redefine democracy and elections. Leonid, we are so grateful for you joining us today and look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you for the invitation, and it's great to have an opportunity to talk to such a great audience today. So it's many things that worth mentioning, like Russian approach to manage coronavirus in many under many different angles. I'll try to keep it short. So the main problem is that every time like Russian politics meets medical needs and conditions, there is a contradiction they can't really solve. January 15th, President Putin announced a constitutional reform which would allow him to stay in Kremlin forever, like which would nullify his preceding presidential term and would allow him to run for the president based on the new constitution on the first term again, albeit the fact he is already in power for 20 years. And of course, it was a very important move, and they had to have a kind of a referendum on these constitutional amendments scheduled for April 22nd. So in March, the coronavirus situation in Europe started to evolve very quickly, and there was a contradiction. On one hand, they kind of had to, they realized they have to put the country on lockdown. On the other hand, they had a hope that maybe they would manage to keep the situation under control before April 22nd, so that they will have this voting, this election, and only after that, that they would start the lockdown. So they actually kind of lost about 3 weeks in moving like there and back. They announced they would shift the date of the voting, then they took this announcement back. During all this time, the propaganda prepared people to withstand the opposition activity, which of course very naturally focused on the issues that having a national referendum amidst a pandemic is kind of quite dangerous, right? So, of course, the opposition pointed everyone's attention to this issue, that we shouldn't have a polling stations up and running and so on April 22nd. And so the propaganda put huge efforts in saying like, this is not dangerous, this is just a typical something like a flu, no one will die, and they only have this in Europe. First they were saying they only have it in China. And there was like a rumor spread by the national propaganda in January, a real disinformation campaign that this virus is kind of dangerous only for like Chinese people or only for like Mongoloid people. So then when it became apparent it's not true, the propaganda took a different stance, saying like, okay, we have our borders closed, so no one will come in, we are doing contact tracing. When it was already apparent we have domestic spread, and we had it since probably 1st of March. But before at least March 20th, propaganda denied it because they were hoping they will be able to make the voting happen. So they not only lost at least 3 weeks, they imposed the lockdown only on March 30th, so 2 weeks after most European countries when the domestic spread was out of control already. But also they did a lot of things to persuade people that it's not dangerous, you don't have to worry, everything's under control, lockdown is not necessary, European countries are stupid with their lockdowns, and so on, so on, so on. So, and when they faced actually the real situation, it was already kind of a tough challenge to re-propaganda people back. So now Russia, which actually had quite good initial conditions, because not many people travel. Like people are not, people are poor, people mostly don't have money to go like skiing in Italy or something like this. Russia has not so many connections to Europe. It has a very sparse, huge area, sparse population. So actually the preconditions for preventing the spread of the coronavirus were quite good. And also we have quite a good level of medicine also. But because of this political issue, they have lost a lot of time in March. And also they have managed to explain to people this is not dangerous and not bad. So now we are already number 8 in total cases, number 5 in active cases, and growing. So European countries after lockdown have managed to put it under control. Russia counted yesterday the largest number of new cases during all the time of pandemic. So we are yet to reach the peak. So this is kind of a small but dramatic example of how involvement of some kind of political propaganda and of political opportunistic approach on top of medical and scientific approach could lead to very severe and dramatic consequences.
Leonid, thank you so much. Just going to invite the Minister and also Rema, who is back with us, to join us for this Q&A section. Thank you so much for everything that we've just heard. It's remarkable how this level that we hear, this pandemic that is penetrates borders, can contextually be seen differently and challenge things differently. So we've had some questions. Please do keep them coming. Also, please do keep coming any ideas or comments that you've had, or if you've seen comm strategies or credible voices that have addressed this well, we want to hear from them too. So the first question which I'll put forward is, we've heard, Leonid, disinformation in Russia. We've heard Minister cultural myths in Zambia. Rema, you mentioned some of the issues around stigma. Culturally and contextually, there are quite a few things which obviously manifest differently for you. What do you think has been crucial from your ability to get the right message across that this is really a serious problem, that if people don't take the right action, that they will be affected negatively? What maybe one or two things, in your opinion, in your country has worked really effectively to get that message across? Has it been a person? Has it been a particular message? I'd love to hear. So maybe we can start with Minister first.
Thank you. I think we drew on our experience from the fight against the HIV/AIDS, that this is a community problem. It's just not a Ministry of Health problem. It's just not a government problem. It's a family problem. And we had to go to the community and identify leadership, the church, the traditional leaders, the chiefs, the NGO leadership, and even the various political leaders at grassroots level. In fact, the Minister of Health coined quarantine politics for now, and in the Ministry of Information, we've coined mask out fake news. And I think that we've really championed these two slogans to try and rally everyone around, the opposition parties, ourselves in government, the various leaders, so that people can identify with this issue as a national problem. I think that that's what has been one of the best strategies that we've employed to ensure that people remove the myths, remove the politics, and see this as a problem. We decided that let's take it to the community, drawing on the experience from before when we fought the HIV/AIDS problem. Thank
you, Minister. Rema?
Hi. I totally concur with the Minister. I think it is very important to inform the people about the government's decision on a real-time basis. And if you look at the way COVID is being managed in India, there's so much of communication that's happening everywhere, from the center, from the state governments, from different leadership. Like rightly pointed out by the Minister, it is so very important to involve the community leadership, especially the religious community leadership. I'm just going to share a small bit from my own experience of dealing with this. Right now, Ramzan is going on in different parts of the world. And this was so important that we had to reach out to the community to take their help, to inform the members of the community that it is so crucial for the police administration to manage COVID, and we could only do it if they stood by us. So what we did, we reached out to the clerics, the Islamic scholars, and we requested them to come up with 1-minute video wherein they are talking about how important it is for you to observe Ramzan. At the same time, you have to do it within your own homes. You just have to be home and offer your prayers. When we collected videos from each imam and each sadr from the local mosque, and we started circulating these videos around, that became so effective. Even though we expected that people will come out and they will start visiting the mosque to offer their namaz during the month of Ramzan, it didn't really happen. We were really surprising to see that people did not step out at all. There were no violations at all. This was one. We also had Easter a couple of days back, and Easter is such a huge festival for the Christians. And this part of the town, and there are really big, old, historic churches. And you could only imagine, if you don't reach out to the community to tell them in advance that they are not supposed to visit the church on an Easter Sunday, you know, there would have been a major communication gap. But again, we roped in the community elders, the pastors came forward, the priests came forward, and they supported us in giving out this message through the local cable TV channels, through WhatsApp groups, through Facebook live videos, so that the message was sent to the people right on time. So these are the small little ways, you know, small strategies that we are employing. Yeah.
Brilliant. And we'll come to you. Leonid, any comment on the question there?
Well, I can compare. So I follow Russian politics. I'm very much involved into what's going on in Russia. All my relatives and friends are there, but I live in Vilnius in Lithuania, like in kind of a political exile now. And of course, I cannot help but compare like how the authorities act in terms of transparency, accountability, information, disinformation, and so on. And well, actually, funny enough, President Putin is used to, he's kind of used to play like a strong man, to pose around the good news, and to, he is used to make use of a crisis to like support his approval rating. Now, what we see, like in Europe, most of the politicians, those we like and those we don't like, gained something politically from this situation and from their crisis management, from Merkel to Macron and to the Prime Minister of Lithuania. He wasn't a very popular, and he was doing very bad in polls. Now he's like really, his approval rating is going up. Not the same with Putin. Surprisingly, he lost very many points of approval rating in the last few weeks. Actually, well, because the population, even in a non-democratic country like Russia, the population had the feeling they are being disinformed, not well informed, they lack transparency. So they had this feeling that uncertainty grows and the government, well, doesn't have a plan because they have seen all this back and forth, and so on. So it's kind of an important lesson, I think, that also like politically it would be smarter even for the Kremlin not to use disinformation this time as their tool.
Thank you, Leonid. I mean, it's fascinating just hearing the different answers and the challenges that you're up against. And I guess the next question is for all of you again, and then we have some particular questions from the audience for individual panelists, which I will convey. So the next question is broadly around, in terms of your COVID-19 strategy and communicating, have you segmented your audiences by vulnerability? And how has that worked for you? And who has been a priority for each of you in terms of maybe the most vulnerable or the most at risk in terms of either you're worried about of the impact that COVID might have on them, or actually on another front that you're worried that they might not listen to the messaging? Who have they been, and how have you targeted them in terms of your work? And I think if I may just add one more thing to that, I think, and there was a particular question around developing contexts and the difficulty of telling people to maybe quarantine or self-isolate when that's a privilege in the eyes of many, and how have you reconciled that? So, Minister, if I may come to you again first, if you don't mind.
What we did immediately was recognize that Corona is beyond a health issue. It's a health, economic, social issue. And so our response has been multi-sectoral. While the Minister of Health addresses the health issues, we realize there'll be other impacts. So we have what we call a Council of Ministers chaired by the Vice President. And so each minister has activities and targets to meet. The Minister of Community Development is responsible for the vulnerable, for the disabled, and that we have to anticipate that if the worst came to the worst and we had to have a total shutdown, what are we supposed to be doing? And so that minister, she's on platforms every time discussing and giving assurance to that demographic that this is what government is doing in readiness. The Minister of Agriculture, the same, that by the time our planting season begins in October, September, if we still have coronavirus, what will the situation be? The Minister of Agriculture is busy on various platforms giving that comfort. The Minister of Finance, because clearly businesses are suffering, families are suffering. Again, he's on various platforms to give that comfort. Myself, as the Minister of Information and Broadcasting and government spokesperson, I'm coordinating all this communication strategy so that government in totality, not just the Minister of Health, but government is in totality, is giving confidence, first by the press briefs every day on the health issues, but also at the same time, we organize that a number of ministers every day, every week, speak to the nation, to the public, and the president himself, since we had the first case, has been addressing the country every 2 weeks to give confidence that, look, everybody is being catered for. On the issue of the challenges in terms of social distancing, they are real. we as a government had to really have a debate internally about this matter, that what do you do with people who really, the 1 meter is next door neighbor, that's how they live. What are we going to do with that? And I think that giving the people information and carrying out this 1 meter social distancing campaign in the urban areas has made people appreciate the concept, and that if they can't do it, at least they have to wear a mask and they have to wash their hands regularly in the day.
Thank you, Minister. And Leonid, in your context, I just want to make sure you're unmuted. And in your context, in terms of the segmentation piece, what's for you been a priority? Because I know you're up against something very different by way of disinformation in a very political context.
Well, for us, the most important thing was to, well, we as a opposition don't have access to like television or any kind of major media. So we work through the internet and through our network of our supporters in regions. We have like 45 regional offices with our volunteers there. So we try to, as we realized how dangerous it is, we reach to our supporters to explain that they actually have to stay home. Our network of like regional offices was the very first to send people back home to work remotely. We did it on like as the very first organization in the country. We did it on March 16th, while the official quarantine in the country was imposed on March 30th, so after 2 weeks. And we used our network of our supporters to fundraise for medical institutions in their cities and their regions. Because we have seen that medical institutions everywhere, apart from Moscow, lack for masks and every kind of other necessary, very basic equipment. So we managed to crowdfund among our supporters enough to completely fund 20 hospitals in different cities to provide them with monthly supply of necessary items like masks and gloves and respirators and whatever they need. And now we also use our network of activists as a tool to trace government activities, not to allow them to fake official statistics. We have a large network of contacts among doctors, so that we kind of double check the government statistics. We kind of have our independent reporting from many hospitals about like factual situation there. And this actually, well, we think this is very important because this kind of doesn't allow government to, well, to do too much disinformation.
Well, and whilst I have you, and I'll go into Rema next, there was a question quite specific to you around, and I think there's a report that came out in the UK also around disinformation and how disinformation coming out of the Russian government channels has spiked across the world. Have you seen a similar spike of disinformation about the Russian opposition as well?
Oh, we don't see spikes because there is always such a level of disinformation about Russian opposition. Well, they were targeting especially our activities of our, like, so we have under our umbrella of our organization, we have an independent labor union of doctors. And through this labor union of doctors, we spread the help to the hospitals and check the information and so on. So there was a spike in disinformation about this independent labor union, like all the usual stuff being funded by the State Department or by George Soros or by Merchants or from Israel or whatever. But they, of course, they targeted it like very specifically because actually the fact that state-owned hospitals, state-run hospitals, ask our like independent labor union for help was the best proof that the government completely fails to provide them with some very necessary and basic things, right? So they had to put it in the spotlight of their disinformation.
Thank you so much. And if I now go on to, I mean, effectively, at the heart of what you're saying is of course, an issue of trust within institutions. And Rema, if I can come to you, have you had to deal with an issue? And this is a question coming from one of our attendees. How have your communication strategies taken into account the global crisis of public trust in institutions? And how do you ensure a message is heard when the messenger might be distrusted?
Well, if you look at the communication that's happening around COVID, especially in India, now that everybody is home, much of the discourse is happening online. People have their mobile phones, they have access to internet, and whatever information they are getting, it's through internet. So the first source of any piece of information is through the internet. So sometimes it becomes really challenging for us to tell them that this is right and this is not. So the answer to your question is that sometimes if they feel that the source from where the information is coming is not to be trusted, then it can manifest into something bigger. And for me, what I deal with is, like, if you look at the amount of misinformation that's happening around COVID in India, in the first 20 days, in most of the places, people were not believing in what the government has to say. They didn't really trust that lockdown is the most effective strategy to fight it, because there were too many sham cures, happening in the digital spaces, telling people that, India is entering into summer and summer is really, really hot in India and COVID cannot sustain in India. The moment COVID is going to enter India, especially the South, where it is too hot, it's going to die. So you are safe. You don't really need to stay home. So these kind of, information which was going around in the digital space, it was really hard to fight. But then the government also put in a strategy wherein, like I mentioned in the beginning, there was real-time passing of information. Government also effectively used social media. On the one side, we had all the public representatives giving speeches. On the other side, the same public representatives, as the minister just mentioned, going around into the community, talking to them person to person. And then digital platforms were effectively used. And in the process, things became, easier. But yes, sometimes if they don't trust the source, for example, you are saying that in India, even after 36 days, we have only 31,000 cases. And, there are conspiracy theorists everywhere. Some people come up with some article in some of the digital platforms, they question, they say that, how is it even possible? Look at China, look at Italy. Italy is a first world country. What happened in Italy? What happened in Spain? And India, you have such a huge population. And yet you're saying that the number of cases are very less. No, this is not possible. I'm sure there is more to it. Maybe the government is not revealing. So these kind of conspiracy theories do the rounds, and sometimes it becomes hard. But then I think over a period of time, we have managed the strategies in a manner that now people do trust in public institutions. So establishing that trust in public institutions was the key
Rema,
to
thank
fight
you so much.
COVID in India.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And one of the comments, I think it was a comment which I think touched on the minister and your point about building a strong coalition of community organizations in terms of religious institutions and other supporters was key. Minister, if I can come to you to maybe speak on the issue of trust within institutions and whether you've had any challenges within the trust issue and how you overcame that if you did have it.
Well, I think that the first issue was to ensure that we give the facts as science has it. And so we have the Zambia National Public Health Institute, and we are the lead in the region of 15 countries. And we've made sure that that's information that we're giving to the public every single day, that the Minister of Health, myself, and the Zambia National Public Health Institute are sitting there and saying this information is what we have. We go beyond just saying the number of cases in hospital or the people who've died from coronavirus. We give them the test we've done, that look, maybe there could be more cases there, but as of today, we've only done 6,028 cases. We have increased screening in communities, and we hope that every day, in every 24 hours, we're doing about 200 to 300 tests. And we hope that as we continue to do that, the people are seeing that government has increased testing from 4 or 5 tests a day to 300 a day. We are trying to make sure that we give them the information that this is the way it is. It could increase by next week. Sometimes we went almost a week with 0 cases. And the people started talking, what's going on, what's going on? Immediately the next day, there were 6 cases. So people have seen now that, look, the government is telling us what it is doing. It is the truth. We have no reason, the government has absolutely no reason to give them fake information, because obviously these days with WhatsApp groups and so on, people in public health would be able to tell the public that government is not giving you the right information. So we have the scientists, we have government itself, and saying, let's give the people as bad as it is, as good as it is, because that's the best we can do for them. They must know the real situation.
Thank you, Minister. And I'm conscious of time, and we do stick to an hour with these webinars. So I have one last question, and if I ask you each for a minute to speak on this issue in terms of your respective positions and institutions that you hail from, whether it's the opposition, the police, or government. We know transparency is important when it comes to informing the public as to the risks of COVID. Where should the line be drawn between optimistic and being realistic in terms of the way you carry the message of the reality of trying to shift people to do the right thing? Leonid, can I start with you?
Sure. Well, I'm a mathematician by my education, so I don't understand how numbers or how information could be realistic or optimistic. It should be like fake or true. And if realistic means true and optimistic means fake, I'm definitely pro-realistic.
Fantastic. Rema, if I can go to you.
Well, I mean, as regards transparency, yes, telling the numbers is important, but telling the names of the patient is not. So that was one area we were so particular, because given the socio-economic conditions in India, sending out the name of a COVID positive patient out into the community is not safe at all, because once they go back, they do, face the wrath of social stigma. So, sometimes you have to draw a line, what is to be told and what is not to be. There was a huge pressure from the media, different media houses, that the government should come up with the names so that the community will be alert on their own. But no, the government stood ground and they decided that no, we are not going to publish the names of the COVID positive patients. I think that's where, taking a decision about where to draw the line matters.
Thank you. And Minister, if I can come to you.
I think for us, the first month, though we've continued, but I think the first month we focused on information dissemination, on what the disease is, what people can do, and how to prevent it. After that, in April, I think we've been focusing on behavior change. Have people listened to the information they were given in March? Have they changed? And now, I think as we go into May, our message is, let's build hope. Let's prepare for the new normal. What is the new normal? How can we live with this corona until it is going to go away? So that's where we are, that let's build hope in the people, family level, business level, and how can we live with a new normal?
Brilliant. Minister, Leonid, Rema, we've had some phenomenal insights from 3 very different contexts to one issue, which is invisible and affecting us all. We thank you so much for your time, for your input. And to everybody who's contributed your questions, we will seek to answer in our Facebook page or our LinkedIn page. Please do follow. There's a link that's going to be shared right now on there. Emma, you're on mute. Hold on. There we go.
I want to say thank you very much to the Minister for being with us. I know it's really difficult because you are so busy in Zambia. To Rema, who's getting 4 hours sleep a night, thank you so much for joining us. And to Leonid. And to all those people all over the world, Amelia in Accra, we've got people connecting from everywhere. So thank you all, even the lambs near Guildford, and my friend Alisoon in Haddenham. Lovely to have you join us. And please join us again on Sunday, where we're going to be discussing journalism and how to bridge the trust deficits in a time of COVID-19.
Fantastic. Thank you all very much. We wish you a lovely evening, and please do follow us on our various platforms. Thank you again to our panelists so much. Have a lovely evening or a day or afternoon, wherever you are. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.